Welcome to TCConline. We're glad you guys could join us today. Well, my name is Brennan. We have Brian with us, Court, and Mike. We are glad you guys are here. Would you worship along with us?
Step out of the grave, break into the wild, and don't be afraid. Run into wide open spaces, graces waiting for you. Dance like the weight has been lifted, graces waiting. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom, there is freedom. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom, there is freedom. Come out of the dark, just as you are, into the fullness of His love. For the Spirit is here, let there be freedom, let there be freedom. Bring all of your burdens, bring all of your scars. Come back to communion, come back to the start. Run into wide open spaces, graces waiting for you. Dance like the weight has been lifted, graces waiting. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom, there is freedom. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom, there is freedom. Come out of the dark, just as you are, into the fullness of His love. For the Spirit is here, let there be freedom, let there be freedom. Chains will fall, prisons shake at the sound of Jesus' name. Lives made whole, hearts awake at the sound of Jesus' name. Chains will fall, prisons shake at the sound of Jesus' name. Lives made whole, hearts awake at the sound of Jesus' name.
Hey, what is up, everybody? Welcome to TCC. My name is Ben, and let me just say thank you for taking a little bit of time out of your day to spend it with us here at TCC. So before we jump into anything, I want you to grab some type of piece of paper, something that you can write on, and something to write with, even if it's like a feather, an ink, and a quill. That's what they call them. Find something to write with. We're going to need it later on in today's experience, but I just want you to be prepared. So maybe this is your first time visiting us here at TCConline. Jump into the chat. We're going to drop a link. Click that link, fill out that form, and we'll send you a gift just because we want you to know that you're appreciated here at TCC. So we always have so much happening here at TCC. Always check out our website. Great place for events, just to get caught up to date with series, with messages. If you missed a week, or maybe you just want to get caught up on an old series, just binge watch a series. That sounds fun. You can do that at tcconline.tv. So with that said, it's music time.
God, I'm on my knees again. God, I'm begging, please again. I need you. Oh, I need you. Walking down these days.
have Discover TCC coming up, and we do these throughout the year, and really has, very little to do with TCC and has everything to do with you. Well, we want to link arms with you to take steps on your, spiritual journey. We call it the life path. And I tell you, one of the things I love about what's happening across all of our churches is so many people are taking a step. I mean, we have people that have never been to church taking a step in. We have people that maybe grew up in church and they know nothing about the Bible. We have people that have walked away from God because of hurt in the church, and they're actually coming back and experiencing God's, love and healing and, His grace. And so I just want to encourage you. All of our physical churches are going to be having Discover TCC, and so maybe you're connecting online, but you're by one of those churches. Just show up, take a step in. We want to get to know you. Maybe you can't take a step into one of these, but you want to. We'll have them throughout the year. And you see, here's what I want, the rest of you to know. Maybe you've gone through Discover TCC. Maybe you've been part of TCC for a long time. I just want you to know, when you continue to give generously, you're helping people on their spiritual journey. I mean, that's what gets so exciting. Like, your generosity is helping us reach more and more people in more and more of our communities, and helping more people maybe take the first step to name Jesus the subject, or maybe for them the first step to actually take a step back to God and experience God's love and healing. Maybe for the first time is bringing families together. You see, when we give generously, we actually partner with God with what God is doing. So thank you for all of those of you who are giving generously. If you haven't taken that step, take that step and watch what God does in you and through you as you partner with God in His kingdom work. Thanks. God is definitely moving. Well, let me pray for all of you. Lord, I thank you for what you're doing in all of our churches. Lord, I pray for people right now who maybe we don't even know about. They're watching online, they're connecting online, and they just haven't taken this up. I hope they know that you're with them, you're present. And Lord, I just pray that one day they will just make themselves known, because we deeply want to link arms with them on their spiritual journey. We want to help, we want to encourage, we want to breathe joy and life into them. And Lord, so Lord, I pray that they'll know that we're not a perfect church, that's for sure, but we are a church that's following your steps in all things. Thank you for what you're doing and using people like us to be part of your kingdom work. In your name I pray. Amen.
Before I spoke a word, you were singing over me. You have been so, so good to me. Before I took a breath, you breathed your life in me. You have been so, so kind to me. And all the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God, and all it chases me down, finds till I'm found, leaves the 99. Oh, I couldn't earn it, I don't deserve it, still you give yourself away. And all the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God, yeah. When I was your foe, still your love fought for me. You have been so, so good to me. felt no worth. You paid it all for me. You have been so, so kind to me. Sing it out. You know the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. You know it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99. Oh, I couldn't earn it, I don't deserve it. Still, you give yourself away. You know the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. Sing it out, come on. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. And all the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. And all it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99. Oh, I couldn't earn it, and I don't deserve it. Still, you give yourself away. And all the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God.
No, you go first.
Okay.
We just talked about this.
Oh.
He's recording now.
Sorry.
There's already bloopers.
Oh no. Hi, I'm Glory,
And I'm Dan.
and we've been married for 32 and a half years.
About 9 years of the happiest years of my life.
Who would rather visit a museum?
Like, would she rather visit a museum or me?
You. Yeah.
Yeah, hands down.
All right. 3, 2, 1.
Was I right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was definitely right. So was Chloe. I'm 1 for 1.
Who is the most competitive? 3, 2, 1.
Zero hesitation. 2 for 2. But the sad part is we're tied. I'm not winning.
And we thought our only match was going to be our shirts.
Where was your first kiss?
Pretty sure I got this one right.
I hope. Okay.
3, 2, 1.
Circle C parking lot?
Yes.
I don't think
Where
that was
we met.
allowed there.
I know. That's why.
Yeah. She attacked me. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
What is your partner's favorite sports team?
Gosh. I'm ready.
3, 2, 1.
Mighty Ducks hockey.
What? I didn't even know about that.
What'd you get for me? Yeah, okay. I have no idea.
Right here. Right here.
Yeah, she doesn't know
I
anything,
don't
so
even
she doesn't care.
I mostly don't care.
Well, so good to have all of you with us today, whether you're connecting at one of our physical churches or connecting online. My name is Chris, and remember, we're one church right where you are. And we're in part 3 of this series titled Verses. And if this is your first time taking a step in with us, I just want you to know, first of all, you're not going to be lost at all. But I want to encourage you, go back and watch parts 1 and 2. You can find it at tcconline.tv/VS for Verses, or you can text VS to 833-709-0962, and we'll send you the link directly. In fact, maybe you've caught parts 1 and 2, and as I'm talking right now, and I say, hey, do you know a friend that needs some relational help, or maybe they're in a messy, broken relational situation right now, and maybe you're thinking of a friend right now. Well, just grab your phone, shoot them a text, send them this link, and just say, hey, why don't you watch this, and let's talk about it together. Well, in this series, we're looking at 4 different battlegrounds that, you and me, we all get to choose which battleground we're going to, decide to engage with. One leads to just more of a mess, more brokenness, more relational hurt. The other one, leads to, healthy, thriving relationships. And we all, I know this is true for you, it's true for me. We all desire to have healthy, thriving relationships, but we also understand that relationships can cause so much hurt, can't they? Well, the first battleground we looked at was doing right versus being right. We looked at the story between, King Saul, the first king of Israel, and, God speaking through a prophet, a judge, a priest. His name was Samuel. And Saul kept on saying, I'm right, I'm right, I'm right. He was so focused on being right. And God kept on saying, Saul, it's not about you being right. I want you to do right. I want you to obey me. And that battleground right there, if we would just obey God, when it comes to our relationships would thrive. But when we focus on being right, that so much hurt comes with it, doesn't it? All of that led to the second battleground, and that was reflect versus deflect. It's easy when someone has hurt us to deflect and point our fingers at them. So easy when someone has betrayed us. We want to get back, get our revenge on them. When someone has lied to us, we want to get back at them, and we want to point out their faults. But here's the thing. What God has called us to do is to reflect on ourselves and what He has called us to do relationally. We can't change anyone else, can't we? Can we? We can't fix someone else. We can't make someone else change, but we want to. And what we saw was, in this story between David and Saul, that David paused and reflected, and he owned what only he could own. All of this leads to our third battleground we're going to be looking at today. And I tell you, all of these battlegrounds start to stack on each other. It's going to lead not only to the third one today, but where we're going to get to next week in part 4 of this series. Before we jump into that third battleground, I don't know about your spiritual journey. I don't know how much of the Bible you've read or not read. I don't know if you grew up going to church, or maybe this is your first time ever stepping into church. I don't know how much of the Bible you believe or don't believe. I don't know any of that, but I'm pretty sure all of you have heard of, the 10 Commandments, haven't you? And so many times the 10 Commandments gets relegated to, either this Bible word, the law, or maybe a more modern word, rules, or maybe just simply a list of do's and don'ts. And maybe for you, that's what you view as, religion or faith or Christianity or the Bible. It's just this big list of do's and don'ts. And, the 10 Commandments just kind of, feed into that narrative, doesn't it? But you see, there are do's and don'ts of the 10 Commandments. And in fact, the Bible talks about this word sin quite a bit. And sin's all about missing the mark, that God has a set of guardrails for us to live within. And when we live within those guardrails, not only are we obeying, that's doing right, following God, but also breathes life into us because God knows what's best for us. But it's when we get outside of those guardrails, when we miss the mark, and that's what sin is. And so this list of do's and don'ts, gets connected to, sin as well. But my question for you is this. Have you ever thought about the 10 Commandments as it has to do with relationships? I mean, again, yes, I understand its law, I understand its rules, I understand its do's and don'ts, but have you ever just sat down and read the 10 Commandments and go, man, this is such a great, healthy, relational set of guardrails that, if I lived within, it actually breathed life into my relationships. Have you ever? You see, the first 3 of the 10 Commandments have everything to do with our relationship with God. It's don't have any gods before me, don't make their idols, and don't take the name of the Lord your God in vain. This is all about our relationship with God the Father. In fact, the entire storyline in the Bible is about God the Father desiring to have a relationship with his creation, with his people, with you and me. That is the storyline of the Bible. The Bible uses this word covenant, and covenant has everything to do with relationships. So these first 3 is like, hey, this is how to have healthy, thriving relationship with God the Father, God, holy God, sovereign God. It's like keep him number 1. And then the 4th one is actually kind of a pivot point. You said it is keep the Sabbath day holy. The Sabbath was like, it was a way to live life in rhythm, meaning the 7th day was about a day to spiritually rest, spiritually reflect, spiritually renew, to keep God and put him number 1 and trust that God will fill in the gaps. But the Sabbath was also not just about spiritually, but it was also about emotionally and physically and mentally resting, renewal, reflecting. And here's what we all know. When we're tired, physically tired, when we're mentally exhausted, when we're emotionally upside down, how does that impact our relationships? And that's why the Sabbath was a rhythm in which God created us to live in, to keep him number 1, to have a rhythm of rest and renewal. And after those 4, we get into the next 6. And think about it. It's all relational. Honor your mother and father. Relational. Don't murder. Relational. Don't commit adultery. Relational. Don't steal. Relational. Don't bear false witness. A simple way to say this. Don't lie. Relational. Last one, don't covet. What's that? Well, don't want something that's not yours. It's the grass isn't always greener on the other side. It's the keeping up with the Joneses. It's looking at your neighbors or the person you're working with and wishing that you had what they had. Relational. You see the 10 Commandments. Yeah, you can just say it's a list of do's and don'ts, fine. Or you can start listening through that God gave us 10 amazing guardrails that if we followed him, it would help us to have healthy, thriving relationships. See, what we all have to understand is sin, your sin, my sin, wreaks havoc on all of our relationships, doesn't it? Again, don't point the finger at other people's sin. Look at yours. I mean, I got to look at mine. My sin wreaks havoc. My sin wreaks havoc. Well, in part 2, we looked at this gap that formed between David and King Saul, a gap that was formed not, so much because of David, but this gap had everything to do with King Saul. In fact, all of these are, sin. Position was sin. And you might be thinking to yourself, how's that sin? Well, Saul failed to realize it was God who placed him as king. In fact, Saul kept his eyes focused squarely on him and not God at all. Sin. Courage. You might be wondering, how's that sin? Well, David had courage not because David was courageous, but because David realized that God was with him. David's eyes kept focused on God. In fact, God's presence, this one massive blue line. David realized that God was with him, but Saul failed to realize, didn't want to. His pride wouldn't allow him to follow God. Jealousy, sin. Manipulation, sin. Deceit, sin. And we come back to the fear, and this fear was all tethered because Saul wasn't following, wasn't leaning into, didn't want to realize that God would have been with him if he was humble and followed him. You see, all of that is sin. All of that got connected to Saul. And what we looked at last week in part 2 is, David did something to, create a gap. He cut off the corner of Saul's robe, and in that moment, he reflected and realized he did something. The text tells us that he was conscience-stricken. Why? Because it wasn't his to take. He went against what God had called him to do and not do. And immediately, David went to close the gap. Right away, he could have deflected it all on Saul and said, hey, Saul, you did all of this. I just did one itty-bitty thing. But Saul, you did all of this. But David didn't point the finger, didn't cast blame. David owned what he had to own. And he went out and closed the gap with Saul. Well, this is where, it's going to lead us to the story we're going to look at in our time together today. It's a story that's not one of those really famous stories, like the famous story, like David and Goliath. That's one of those famous stories. This isn't one of those really famous stories, but what we're going to see is David does something that paints such a powerful picture of this third battleground. Now, there's a pretty wide time gap between the moment where God, through Samuel, tapped David on the shoulder to be king and, to the point where David actually becomes king. It was somewhere around 15 years. I mean, that's a long time for David to wait to be king. In that time, King Saul had died a pretty brutal death. He got injured on the battlefield, and then he killed himself. One of David's closest friends, who happened to be a son of Saul, his name is Jonathan. Jonathan had died on the battlefield. I mean, David had ran for his life. I mean, chaotic journey, but finally David is king. Finally, David sits on his throne in Jerusalem, and this is where we're going to pick up the story. If you have a Bible, turn with me to 2 Samuel chapter 9, 2 Samuel chapter 9, and this is where we're going to step in. King David asks, is there anyone still left of the house of Saul? I mean, a lot of them had died. And I just can't even imagine David bringing up Saul's name, the guy that repeatedly tried to kill him, the guy that betrayed him, the guy that deceived him, tried to manipulate. I mean, Saul, but he's like, is there anyone left? And he goes, whom I can show kindness for Jonathan's sake. Jonathan, meaning his close friend, son of Saul. Now there was a servant of Saul's household named Ziba. They summoned him to appear before David, and the king said to him, are you Ziba? And he goes, at your service. And David asked, is there no one still alive from the house of Saul to whom I can show God's kindness? Now we got to stop here for a moment. When you hear the word kindness, what comes into your mind, into your spirit? When you hear the word kindness, what gets attached to it? When you think of being kind, what does that look like? You see, in the Hebrew, which is what the ancient Jewish scriptures, the Old Testament, is written in, the Hebrew word for kindness here in the text is the Hebrew word hesed. And that word hesed, in Hebrew, it actually gets connected to our modern word love. But it's not just as simple as love. You see, it has everything to do with unfailing love or loyal love or steadfast love or faithful love. If you grew up reading the King James, you heard the phrase loving kindness. You see, this starts to paint the picture for this one Hebrew word, well, for kindness or for love. But you see, this wasn't about a feeling or an emotion. It had everything to do with love in action. You see, hesed isn't just an emotion that you feel inside towards someone. It was something that moved your action. This is why David's like, I want to show kindness, show hesed. And we see this word to show up throughout the ancient Jewish scriptures or Old Testament. Isaiah wrote it this way. He goes, though the mountains be shaken, the hills be removed, yet my unfailing love for you will not be shaken. Micah wrote these very familiar words. He goes, and what does the Lord require of you? To act justly and to love mercy. The word mercy is hesed. He goes, and to walk humbly with your God. All of these are actions, not just an emotion that you hide inside of yourself. No, this is how you live. This is how you walk. This is how you obey, doing right, following God. Then the most probably famous of all the Psalms, Psalms 23, David wrote it this way. He goes, surely your goodness and love, your hesed will follow me. All action, all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. You see, we come back, and when David says, hey, I want to show them kindness. Whose kindness? God's. God's hesed. You see, so many times we think to ourselves, well, I just don't think I could show that to someone. I don't think I could extend that to someone. That person has done this to me. I can't do it. And maybe you can't. And I think this is what David understood. I'm sure there were still deep wounds from 15 years of what Saul did to him and Saul's family. And that's why he says, I want to show him God's kindness. You see, maybe you don't have the kindness in you, but it's not about what's in you. It's about doing what is right, extending the kindness that God has shown you and extending it, well, to someone else. And David's like, I need to show God's hesed. And Ziba answered the king, there's still a son of Jonathan, but he is lame in both feet. Saul's grandson, Jonathan's son, at a young age, tragic accident. Both of his feet were crippled. So David says, hey, go get him, bring him to me. So they brought him to David, and we're told that when Mephibosheth, such a great name, son of Jonathan, the son of Saul, came to David, he bowed down to pay him honor. And David said, with all of this emotional excitement, he goes, Mephibosheth. And he goes, at your service. David goes, don't be afraid. For I will surely what? Show you kindness. I said, action. It's not just feeling. And then he actually tells him the two actions he's going to show him. He goes, I'm going to restore to you all the land that belongs to your grandfather Saul. Everything that David had taken away from Saul, everything that David had conquered, he's like, I'm giving it back to you. Can you imagine? That came with wealth and power and position and influence. And David's like, I'm going to give that all to you. And it gets better than that. And you will always eat at my table. A place only reserved to those closest to him. Could you imagine if you were Mephibosheth? You knew all the story. You knew the song. Saul killed his thousands and David his tens of thousands. You knew how much hurt and betrayal and deceit had been shown by his grandfather to King David. And David's like, I'm giving you all of it back, and you are an invited guest to my dinner table. And Mephibosheth bowed down and said, what is your servant that you should notice a dead dog like me. You see, Mephibosheth fully grasped what David should have thought about him. He fully grasped the reality of his grandpa Saul. He fully understood. And he was beyond himself. Like, I'm a dead dog. I'm worthless. I'm nothing. But you're showing me his set. You see, you got to hold on. You got to hold on to this. You see, forgiveness has nothing to do with the other person. Do you realize that? Forgiveness has nothing to do with the person who has hurt you. Forgiveness has everything to do with you. It has everything to do with you. Are you going to show kindness? Are you going to show love? Are you going to show hesed to the person that has hurt you the deepest? And I know right now, some of you are thinking to yourself, hey, but Chris, if you knew the storyline, but Chris, if you would know the depth of the hurt, but Chris, if you know what that person did to my kids, but Chris, if you know what that person did to my bank account, but Chris, if you know what that person has repeatedly done to me, but Chris, and I know some of you right now, you got your list of but Chris. Why? You shouldn't show forgiveness to another person. I get it. I've been there. And that's why I think it's so significant that David says, I want to show God's hesed, God's kindness, God's love. Because I still think there's some within David's like, I'm not sure if I have it in me, but God does. Remember the battlegrounds. Are you going to be right or do right? Remember the battlegrounds. Are you going to deflect everything on that other person? Or are you going to reflect on God and say, God, what have you called me to do? Remember the battlegrounds. Which one? It's easy to stay on the but Chris and start developing your narrative of why you don't want to forgive the other person. But you see, I think about these words that Paul wrote. But God demonstrates his own love. His own love demonstrates action in this. That while we were still sinning, while we're sinning, not as soon as we got everything worked out and we stepped into an area of perfection and we cleaned it all up and had all the right answers. No. While we were sinning, what happened? Jesus Christ died for you and for me. Think about the gravity of that statement. When you want to say, but Chris, that person has done all of this against me. I'm not asking whether or not you have what it takes to forgive. What I'm saying to you is this. When you realize what Christ has done to forgive you, you show that love, that kindness, that hesed, that forgiveness to others. Why? Because you realize while you were sinning, what Christ did for you, what he did for you. We've been looking at this word image of an iceberg. I'm just telling you. And I know this forgiveness thing is massive. Because right now, there's someone that has hurt you that deeply. And you're trying to figure out how to get out of forgiving, or how to spin forgiving, or how to come up with your but Chris list that you want to give me to tell me why you're right. I get it. I've been there. I've been doing church stuff a long time, and church stuff is all people stuff. And we're all messy. Hear me. I get it. But forgiveness is what's below the waterline that leads to healthy thriving, God-centric relationships. If you don't forgive, you're going to stay above the waterline. And I'm telling you, the only other thing that will grow is bitterness. And bitterness is a cancer. And bitterness will infect every relationship. Hear this. Hear this. If you don't forgive, you will become bitter. And that bitterness is a cancer, and it will infect every relationship connected to you. Some of you know that because that's what's happening right now. But as you receive Christ's forgiveness, while you were still sinning, while you are still sinning, Jesus died for you. The more you realize the forgiveness that God extended through his son on the cross for you, that's the only way you will have the capacity to extend that forgiveness to other people. Let me ask you the question. Who do you need to forgive? Who do you need to forgive? I want to encourage you. At our physical churches, we handed out these simple cards, but maybe you have a note card or piece of paper or a back of a napkin or a Post-it note laying around you. I just want you to grab a pen and a piece of paper and lay it in front of you. Maybe at the top of it, just simply write, I forgive. And just hold on to it for a moment. You see, the last week of Jesus' life, he and his disciples, his leadership team, had entered into Jerusalem. And Jesus knew what was coming. His disciples, his leadership team, his closest friends, they had no clue. I mean, Jesus was trying to explain it, but they still didn't grasp it until it happened. But Jesus knew what was coming his way. And Jesus said, truly I tell you, if anyone says to this mountain, go and throw yourself into the sea, and does not doubt in their heart, but believes that what they say will happen, it will be done for them. I mean, the statement is one of those faith-shaking statements where Jesus is like, hey, you got to believe that God can do anything. Do you believe that? That God can. He's like, hey, don't have doubt. Believe in a God, an all-powerful God that can do anything. But he doesn't stop there. He goes, therefore I tell you, whatever you ask for in prayer, believe that you have received it and it will be yours. And we love these words, don't we? I mean, those words like, yes, I want to pray and ask. And well, Jesus just said, like, if I pray and ask, it will be done for you. But remember, power of prayer isn't so much about getting God to do what we want him to do for us. The power of prayer is us asking God, what's your will? We did this whole series called Rooted. I would just encourage you to go on TCConline.tv and click on that series, Rooted, because it's all on prayer. Yes, sometimes we pray and ask specifically, and God does that. But more importantly, it's us seeking God's heart, God's will, God's direction. And say, hey, God, this is what I want. But God, more than what I want, it's what you want. I want to follow you. And so many times we stop reading right there because we want the pray, God will give me, don't we? But it's what Jesus says next. We've got to keep reading. We've got to pay attention to it. He goes, and when you stand praying. He goes, yeah. You need to ask God. But while you're there, because we like that part. He goes, while you're there, and when you stand praying, if you hold anything against anyone, anyone, there's no wiggle room. There's no but Chris, and in this context, but Jesus. He said, anyone, anything. And as soon as you want to start drawing up your list and what doesn't go in those 2 columns, Jesus has simply said, hey, anyone, it means anyone, and anything, he goes, forgive them, so that your Father in heaven may forgive you your sins. You see, the more we understand God's forgiveness to us, the more we're moved to forgive other people. But remember, doing right is forgiving. Being right is pointing out the other person's sin. Deflecting is pointing out all the wrongs of the other person. Reflecting is all about going, God, this is what you've done for me. This is how you've shown me your forgiveness, and I'm extending it to you. Who do you need to forgive? Because if you don't, it's going to lead to bitterness. It's true. It's real. Maybe on that piece of paper, you write down a name or 2 or 10. Or maybe on that piece of paper, you actually start writing the details of what that person has done to you. And as you write, you're saying, God, give me the capacity to show hesed, your kindness, your unfailing love, your steadfast love, your forgiveness to that person. Maybe, just maybe, as you invite God into that journey, you'll start to grasp, as you forgive others, his forgiveness for you. But please, whatever you do, write something down. There's something about getting that hurt, that name, that story out into the light where God's grace can shine a bright light on it. And my prayer is that you, in the same breath, will experience God's forgiveness. While you were still sinning, God, through his son Jesus, died for you.
I'm the one who held the nail. He was cold between my fingertips. I've hidden in the garden. I've denied you with my very lips. God, I fall down to my knees with a hammer in my hand. You look at me, arms open. Forgiven, forgiven. Child, there is freedom from all of it. Say goodbye to every sin. You are forgiven. Of the things I wish I hadn't done, are some things I wish I hadn't seen. Just the thought of your amazing grace down to my knees with a hammer in my hand. You look at me, arms open, forgiven, forgiven. Child, there is freedom from all of it. Say goodbye to every sin. You are forgiven. I could have been 6 feet under. I could have been lost forever. Yeah, I should be in that fire, but now there's fire inside of me. Here I am, a dead man walking, no grave than a whole God's people. On the weight of all our evil, lifted away forever free. Who could believe? Who could believe? Forgiven, forgiven. You love me even when I don't deserve it. Forgiven, I'm forgiven. Jesus, your blood makes me innocent. So I will say goodbye to every sin. I am forgiven. I am forgiven.
And that is our service for today. I truly hope that you wrote a name on that piece of paper, at least one. Maybe you didn't. There's still time. Even if you just want to think about it a little bit more, just commit to writing a name on that piece of paper. I hope that you enjoyed the message. I hope that the music lifted you up. And I hope you have an amazing week, and I hope to see you back here next week.